And I just need to make sure that Zoom that mutes the YouTube channel, and then I can sit down. All the steps.
The stock has been soon.
Okay, that is muted. So we should be okay.
Can everyone hear us?
Can you hear us?
Thank you.
Are you okay there, Dan, or maybe back?
Take the desk and put it back there.
Yeah, sure.
Because literally,
Yes.
I'm blanked out.
Yeah,
But do you want to use that little table instead?
I'll use that little table.
Just because Board of Ed has things specifically taped and,
Yes.
yes. So I'm just following what they have set up.
So can technically somebody sit there?
Technically, yes, because it's an 8-foot table.
So Dan, you can sit where the green tape is.
No,
If
that's
you
it.
want.
You want to sit that close to Dan?
No fancy.
all right. I think I'll wait for
Two
him to
Dan's
get
at the
place.
same table.
Oh, yeah.
That never
Double D.
Well, and you both have the last name with S, so it's just that much harder for notes. Right, Ann? Oh, yeah.
Right.
That's like BBC with all the Jennifers.
Yeah.
Luckily, one of those like Jennifer.
It's like you've exceeded your maximum gender.
You're all set, Dan?
I'm good.
Great. Everybody can hear me on the screen? Paul, Sarah, good evening. Nita, hello. This is Dan Spring, and I'm calling the Board of Finance meeting for the town of North Stonington to order this day, September 16th, 2020, and we'll call it 7:04. Present myself, Dan Smith, Carolyn Howell, Ann Aiken, Sarah Nelson, Paul Simon, and Brett is sitting as alternate, Brett Mastriani. First on the agenda to follow is public comments. I don't know if we have any public on.
We have 2 public on, one is Stephanie Mastriani and one is a phone number. So either public, Anita, either public, if you're interested in making a comment, please unmute yourself and start talking. Seeing none, moving on.
Yes, so moving on to agenda item number 3, which has got some pieces in it. So what we're looking at, and Christine will be helping me out here, is the closeout of the fiscal year 2019-20, both for general government and Board of Ed. So for you joining on Zoom, I'm hoping you got your paperwork and were able to print it out. All right. So why don't we do general government first? Christine.
Okay, so I distributed the most up-to-date end-of-year
Yes.
profit and loss for general government. I highlighted, if you're in person, I highlighted that it was the July 19th through June 2020 on the first page. So this will be, to my knowledge, where we end up until the auditor comes in November. So this is realistically where we're at. So the general government give back that I can say in draft form, not including the additional revenue that we took in and the additional appropriation that we did for LoCIP is $416,486. And the reason that this is so high again for this year is because we had a lot of things that we weren't able to do because of COVID. As far as highway projects, we had some retirements in the highway department and positions that were left vacant for periods of time while we did searches. So we had lower salaries on those, but we have filled all those vacancies. We also had less overtime because the winter was not as bad. Those are our most notable, but if you look through the profit and loss, it depends on the commission or board or department as to what they did not spend for the year. The rec commission, I will just note, they had a $17,000 approximate loss of revenue. So they chose to have $17,000 that they did not spend from their operating budget to offset that. That was a conscious decision that they made to be responsible with their funding. So if anyone has any questions on general government.
Yeah, if I could start. Christine, could you
Yep.
just give us the number again for the surplus?
Yep, 416,486.
Okay, and if you could correlate that to your report?
What?
And-
It does not, so if you were to take all of the expenditures for the town and take out the Board of Ed, because we do not treat them as part of general government for our purposes, then you would get that number. So that is on page 12. We have total expenses that we did not spend, 622,101.73. And then if you take out the Board of Ed on page 10, that's where you get that number.
Okay, the line just above that where it's got total expense and then they bring it across where you've got a percentage of 97.4.
Yes.
Those numbers, there's something not right there. I didn't run the numbers down, but 97.4 would actually be 529,836 and 34 cents.
This is all from QuickBooks, so
But it could be in the expense column, in terms of addition.
it's all computer generated QuickBooks stuff, so I can talk with Susan about it, but
Well, computer or not, if you run the percentage is not correct, if the numbers are correct.
Could it be a rounding error?
No. No, so there's about a $1,400 difference there. Give or take. Hate to point it out.
yeah, it's all what's put in, so I don't know how it would have it.
Comes out to 97.4 if you do the math over the budget. So you divide the 19,849 by the 20,378, it come out to 97.4.
Maybe I told you the wrong one to look at for the first number. That's all I got.
All right. Yeah, I know it'll be reviewed by audit.
Yes, Sandy and Dan will rip it apart.
But just an editorial comment, if you recall, we were a little over 400,000 that brought forward out of unassigned for fiscal year 2020-21. So COVID related gave it back, so restored the unassigned essentially.
Now, did any COVID expenses come out of here?
Yes.
But we wouldn't receive the income from that yet?
No. So we have submitted our first quarter to FEMA and have gotten tentative approval. And FEMA will cover 75% of specific expenses. And then the coronavirus relief fund through OPM is covering the 25% that was not covered through FEMA. And if there were eligible expenses that were not FEMA eligible, it will cover them up to 100%.
To date, what has that number been? I know it's fluid. We continue to move forward here.
We have probably spent about $50,000 for everything. That includes resident trooper overtime that we had for the transfer station to make sure people were social distancing. So, and that is ineligible.
Okay, so is it the 50,000 for last fiscal year
I would say to date.
to date? Okay.
It's every Saturday that they were going up there for weeks and weeks, so I don't have the breakdown.
Any questions on general government closeout? All right.
So the Board of Ed give back was how much?
I cannot speak to the Board of Ed give back.
Yeah, on what they presented and was approved by their board, it was 126,000.
But that would go into the.
Yeah, so
the non-lines.
it was 100, excuse me, it was 128,565. Their draft was 126,297, but then was amended and approved at 128,565.
Now, this was given back to the town or that went into this?
Okay, so we have approved the non-lapsing account, the RISA account. And they, under that, they are able to take 2% of their expenditure budget. That number would be 275,509.26.
So
So-
they didn't take that out of here, and then the additional 128 is going to be.
Now, it's anticipated that the 128,565 will go into the non-lapsing account. They could have, if it were not expended, have gone up to 275,509.
Right.
So two things that haven't happened. We haven't set up the account yet for that, nor have we gotten a letter stating that that in fact is going to be the action, that the 128 is going to go into the non-lapsing.
So if it does go in, there is no give back from the Board of Ed.
Yeah, I would not anticipate any give back from the Board of Ed. Now, it's important to point out that the majority of those dollars went to buy Chromebooks for our student population and was presented. And if you remember, we were saying, gee, we see that as a large one-time expenditure, perhaps not to be in the budget and could come as an appropriation. So that was kind of the initial talk. But through COVID-related circumstances, they've had that surplus where they've been able to buy those Chromebooks with money that had been approved to Board of Ed by the town of North Stonington. And so we don't see that bump in their budget, nor is it something that's been asked through appropriation. So as much as I hate to say it, it kind of worked out because of the circumstances of COVID.
Did they buy them for every student or just?
They had 500 ordered. I don't think all of them are in because you have to think about every school system in the United States has gone remote.
Major backlog with Chromebooks, QTAC, and all of you got major backlog, so.
So did that come out of this budget here?
Yes.
From what I understand, Carolyn, it's every student in the high school, and because that was their original plan, and then there are additional on top of that. I just don't know what the distribution is. I don't know if it's based on need for children that don't have access at home, but the Board of Ed can speak to that.
Was just curious if it like follows the student, you know.
It does in the high school. That was the plan with the one-to-one, from what I understood, right?
And how many for that?
Peter Nero publicly has stated that they ordered 500.
Yeah, it's supposed to, once you establish the program, it's less money every year because of each year, because you're only getting for the incoming freshmen, first year, whatever you call them.
Yeah, so again, it was another reason why we knew it was going to be a bump and we didn't want it to be part of the budget and carry it forward into the next year. So there have been, it's hard to say, but some saving graces in the circumstances we have existed in since March. Okay, so we've got those two closeouts. And again, once they've been audited, they will be actual numbers. So we don't call them as actual numbers at this point. Best of to our knowledge, they are correct, but they will be audited. Okay. The next is project closeouts. And the one that we're going to be talking about is the Emergency Management Center. And didn't have enough prints. I know it was sent to you. Yeah. So Christine, maybe you can just walk us through the numbers on the cover letter.
Absolutely. So the project was voted on to not exceed $6,360,000. We financed $4,798,768 through USDA for 20 years at an interest rate of 2.75%. We had a DECD, Department of Economic Community Development grant for $300,000 for the project. We also had an Eversource energy credit of $12,479.50 that we put back to the project account. And through planned redemption of debt through budgets, we paid $1,161,568. So the total expense was the total amount that we financed and had for on the revenue side was $6,272,815.50. We spent $6,249,005.73. So we will be sending a check to the USDA towards the principal for $23,809.77.
Okay. Did you just compute all of those numbers that they all were correctly represented in the cover letter?
But do you do an outside audit on projects of this size, like this and school
US
modernization?
USDA does it.
They do it?
In fact,
Is it a construction audit or is it just?
they go through everything. It was one of the reasons why we did business with USDA is that they watch every nickel and dime and are on site as well.
And our auditing firm also audits the project accounts as part of our audit, our annual audit.
Any questions on that particular project? And I will say that, you know, for those who have a little legacy, that was a long project from start to finish. And there were amendments to design in the beginning. And then relative to the resolution and approved dollar amount, we did have an excess, so we were able to accommodate the outside building that you see at the Emergency Management Center. And we've talked about this with all the smaller peripheral equipment is there, the boat, the ATV, and so forth. So, all right. Any questions on that? All right. Mike is not with us. Mike Ergo is not with us tonight. I do have project updates. Nita, I don't know if there's anything that you could talk to relative to that, or Christine. I mean, we're soon to see a closeout for the school project. But the other one that we do have in the works is Boombridge. And I don't know if there's any comment there. Need any comment from you on any projects?
A good comment today. We had the request for people to come in for the $20,000 grant that we have gotten, and we got a very good, seemingly knowledgeable, I think it was 4 people that were very interested from nowhere close to us, but all willing to come and look at it. And so this was their walkthrough. And on October 2nd, we will know how many of them we will have to make a decision about, hopefully, between them. So that's kind of exciting.
So that's a feasibility and conditions assessment of the John Dean Gallup House at the Hewitt Farm. And we got a grant through the State Historic Preservation Office to complete that work. To my knowledge, everything is moving forward and on schedule with Boombridge. I think it's supposed to be done in November,
Yes.
so.
And can I ask a question? The
Yeah.
projects update.
Yeah.
So now with the referendum going through for the middle school wing, where is any money for anything that we might have to do to that building? On the exterior, wherever, coming from? Will that, if there is money over a certain amount, will that have to go to a?
Yeah, one, I don't know what's going to be in the lease agreement in terms of who does what.
Yeah.
So I mean, I think we're a little bit premature there. We would hope that any surplus rent versus costs would come to the general fund. So, and I think the lease was going to be relatively expansive to, include groundkeeping, outside maintenance, inside maintenance, systems, everything.
I thought we were responsible for the envelope of the building. That's where my concern comes from.
Yeah.
If we didn't budget for it, is that something that would eventually be, I guess? an
Rather than me
appropriation?
comment, that would all be negotiated in the lease, and I haven't seen those documents.
Right, we're still in the middle of negotiations. We're still-
Hi, Dan, this is Paul.
Go
Would you
ahead.
expect the Board of Finance to review the lease?
Usually, contracts are, executed by the general government, overseen by the panel of Board of Selectmen and reviewed by our treasurer. So our concern would be, okay, cost, if any, and income, as opposed to the contractual implications.
Okay, so you wouldn't expect to see those documents beforehand or approve them, or not necessarily?
No, I think that they'll have a public viewing, but, I don't think I think there's enough eyes on. We're concerned kind of at a little bit higher level in terms of any cost to the town, how those would be covered, and or revenue.
Right, okay.
I've seen other towns that they have the Board of Finance do the feasibility study of the lease first, right?
Yeah, in my own opinion, and I just speak from my experience here with the board, we don't have the funding to bring on an attorney, for instance, to do the review, which would be very important, where the town does. We have funding for auditing services, but not legal services. So a lot of pluses going on. Boy,
I just actually got, read something that we ended up getting our additional approval for all one-to-one devices for the whole district from the state. Just found out.
that's terrific.
So that should be even more
That's
good
good.
news and revenue
Yeah, that's good
that
news.
we don't have to spend.
Absolutely. All right, anything else on projects? Mike Anderson and I have one more meeting with the School Modernization Project Committee. A lot of what's happening now is in the hands of the state. And though we have been getting reimbursements, we still haven't concluded our third tranche of financing with USDA. And we hope that they move along quickly, but the state has been known not necessarily to move at light speed, but what we're trying to do is get it done so that we can close out our short-term financing, which is still in place until we get that third tranche. So I know that's maybe a lot of things that not all of you understand, but it is something that's being looked at very closely by School Modernization Project Committee, Board of Selectmen, and our treasurer. Any comments relative to that, Christine? All right. And number 4 is the profit loss reports to date, which you got for Board of Selectmen. So that would be fiscal year 2020-21. So it would be August. I did request them from Board of Ed and did not get a response. So they owe us July and August. So I made that kind of imperative. They were really tied up in the closeout of their fiscal year. And I don't know what else to say. Forthcoming. So you'll probably see something after this meeting where I've forwarded those documents to you. The tax report, all of you have gotten a copy of that. And to date, you know, our next big collection would be in January. So we're actually looking pretty good. We do have a carryover of some accounts that are with in the hands of attorneys, where either payment plans have been set up or liens have been put on properties. So we ended the year last year, and you had reviewed those numbers in pretty good shape, you know, hitting our bogey. There's always going to be just a little bit of overlap based on how late collections come in. But Karen and our attorney are like terriers. They're on it, you know, trying to follow up on delinquencies and getting those revenues in, those tax collections in.
I just wanted to point out on the tax report, our collection last year is lower than it should have been at this time because we didn't have payments due for the first bill until September 1st instead of having them be due August. So that's why when you look at those numbers, it looks the 31.98% compared to this year's 51.34%. I just wanted to remind everyone of that.
Yeah, thanks. I mean, in the end, we came out in good shape, but yeah. Was there a comment from somebody?
No, there's a clock on someone's computer that says what hour it is every half hour.
Okay.
How many people took advantage of the tax, you know,
The COVID
waiving
deferral
the
program?
interest? Yeah,
Only 11.
11.
I have a question.
Sure, Sarah.
Is there a benchmark in terms of percentage related to like delinquent taxes? Do we know if we're on par with other towns or we're doing better or worse? I'm just curious if there's a range.
It's a little bit all over the map, quite frankly. Our absolute target is a collection rate of 98.5, but we don't sit to be satisfied with 98.5. We should be collecting 100%.
Yeah, I was just curious in terms of other towns, but that's okay. And then I didn't catch the comment, or I didn't actually know what was the COVID tax thing that folks could take advantage of. I apologize, I'm not familiar.
So under Executive Order 7S, there was an option for towns to have a deferral program for taxes. So instead, if you applied for it prior to July 1st, your first tax payment would not be due on August 3rd, but would be due on October 1st. So I want to say it was about $220,000 worth of taxes that have deferred to October 1st for collections. If they are late, they have to pay the interest for all 3 months. It is not a waiving of the interest. It's you have until that day, and if you do not pay on that day, you owe all the back interest.
Thank you.
And Karen gave me a little bit more information on the accounts that are with Attorney Langhammer. So for the total all the years going back to 2004 tax year, it is only $93,453.18. 93,453.18.
So there's 15 accounts that total that amount?
Yes.
Okay. And those are all foreclosures?
They just, not necessarily, they're just all ones that haven't paid. Some of it is that, you know, we're just gonna have to get the money from the estate after the person passes because they just are not going to pay the taxes. So they continue to collect interest.
Yeah, and you know, most towns, I mean, it's hard to hit 99% or 100% simply because there's life events constantly happening where people have filed for bankruptcy, have died, have moved, have taken plates off vehicles. I mean, it's a myriad of things, but, and that part can get a little ugly, but I think we're doing a pretty good job, you know, within the framework that is appropriate. Okay, agenda item number 5, revalve. Once a week, I call Daryl Del Grosso, our assessor, at this stage, and I did talk to him the end of last week. They were just finishing up batch 5. I know they were kind of starting batch 5 last time we met. He didn't have anything conclusive for me. I don't know if anything more has been shared with
He
Christine.
told me yesterday that everything is in.
Okay, so you heard it. Daryl had told me last week they were close. Christine is saying everything is in. And the only thing that was shared with me that prices on specific types of properties had moved up. And as I had shared with you earlier, some months ago, it looked like it could be 6 to 8% or more. So things like ranches and capes all had gone up in value. So I'm hoping what I say next, I hope is truthful, is that having been on the strategy of building a better fiscal profile for the town, making investments in the town vis-a-vis our public services and school system, that it then moves to enhancing assessments on properties, residential properties here in the town. And residential properties make up over 85% of our grand list. So it was the fastest way to put, even though it's been a long process, to put a push on building our grand list. And again, our grand list last valuation was 2010. And if you remember, we were just coming out of the recession, still living with it, 2008 and 9. So we were in the trough and had lost $100 million off our grand list because of that valuation. So I'm not anticipating that we regain that 100 million, but I'm hoping we close the gap.
Do you know how many homes have been built since 2010 in addition?
I don't. I know that for even 2020, we were ahead of what was in 2019.
We're actually in the quarterly, we're gonna have that information for under EDC of 2020, how many homes have been built this year, because
Yeah.
it's actually quite a bit.
Can you compare it to 10 years ago? Just curious.
Yeah, I can probably get those numbers.
Sure.
Is what I'm working on that by Monday for Nita. As we talk, you talked about the grand list.
Yeah.
We talked about it at our EDC meeting about, you know, the farm tax break. And is it something that the town should be more stringent on it and look into and enforce more? Because something like that really takes a knock out of our grand list when someone applies for the farm tax relief and they're not actually farming and things like that. Is that something that comes through Board of Finance that dictates that down, or? Where is that?
We can, absolutely. And, for those who are not familiar, you can put property into agricultural, and that is going to be taxed at a lower rate. And you have a 10-year exclusion. But if it's examined or inspected within that 10 years or sold before the 10 years is up, the tax money is clawed back to whatever.
It just sounds like we don't always have a great handle on what we're doing with it once it's applied and follow up on it.
I would disagree with that. Our assessor is currently doing inspections on those properties. He did 2 yesterday, and has more on his list, so he has become more aggressive. We did send letters out
Well,
last year.
so this is a new thing.
Well,
we're
that's part of his job
Okay.
responsibilities. Yeah.
There's a
Yeah.
lot of things that people can do there consider farming, that really, it's not what you.
Right, the question is, as long as they meet those requirements, is
right.
what you want.
Yeah.
And you just don't want people taking advantage of it.
Right, exactly.
Because it does hurt
Oh, I
everything
agree.
we all work for,
Yeah.
even on EDC, to grow that grand list and when things go into farming.
The assessor's office uses the personal property taxes as a jumping off point if someone's in the farming exemption and aren't declaring any personal property items like tractors or things to do the farming. That's their first red flag of who they need to go out with.
Okay, great.
That is something that they've been working on over the last week.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah, and while we're talking about it, I mean, you've heard me say that I think activity breeds activity in terms of economic development, which we hope is continuing to build our grand list. Just the rehab of the property at the Rotary,
Yeah.
the small houses, I mean, they're doing a great job there.
The
I
old
think
subway is gonna get.
Should
rehabbed
be
a little bit as well.
recognized at some point, the pub here in town. I mean, I think it's just another addition where things that were kind of old and tired have taken on new life. And I think it says a lot relative to where the town is heading, and hope that it just brings in more.
Yeah, there's quite a few things on the horizon, so should help our grand list.
I had shared with, and we can make the article available to you, but this was a publication that was in the Wall Street Journal a weekend ago. And there was a great piece about Trillium and what they're doing in the region, and more importantly, what their investment in North Stonington is all about. So we've gotten that copy to Juliet.
I gave a copy to Juliet.
Yeah, so copies can be made available for you. So, and, just a very progressive young couple pushing things forward. It's great. Needless to say, the grand list, I said it many times, is the engine to everything that we talk about in these meetings. Everything that funds what we've done and hope to do. Right. Next is agenda item number 6 is Board of Finance policy review. So this has come up a couple of times on the agenda. Some time ago, I did forward to you the policies that are currently in place on the website for your review. And, I think we've had some general comments in meeting about them and their appropriateness. I also sent to you some guidelines on 2 policies that one we have in place, the other that we don't. One for balanced budget, one on the unassigned, managing the unassigned. So I don't think we're nailed down yet on new policies, but I think in fairness to our review, there's probably several policies that are in place now that I don't think really are functional relative to our activities. And, I think that, in my opinion, and I think we've talked about this, probably should be voted on and rescinded. So I think there's 5 of them. One was the appropriations requests and transfers. I think we could do some amendments there, but I probably would leave that one in place. The end of fiscal year budget reconciliation, as already stated, that's driven by statute. So, I mean, I think that's one that could be open for rescindment. The next one is the town auditor interface. I mean, I think that really is one of the responsibilities of the Board of Finance, and that by statutes, we have to have an annual audit. So again, you know, there's some redundancy there, and I think that's one that's open for rescindment. The other one is loss of outside revenue. So the point of this one was really directed to hypothetically the Board of Ed. If we should get less in revenue from the state, that the Board of Ed budget should be cut by that amount. Which was interesting, they don't refer to is that there is a state statute in place that we cannot reduce the Board of Ed budget unless it's being driven by population. So if our population drops, our demographics change, and then we can bring in a budget that is less than the previous year's budget.
I thought it was down by student population.
Yeah. Student population.
There are a number of contingencies to that. It's not just student population. It's
Okay.
also.
That's one of the biggest ones though, Ann.
It's also if the state reduces the amount that they give to school.
Yeah, EDC, yeah.
Yeah, the EDC money.
There's 5 or 6 different contingencies for reducing our budget,
Yep.
school budget.
So the way this one is written though, it just is, it's not specific, you know, in terms of like matching it up to those criteria, for instance.
Right, well, and there are quite a number of things like most of our revenues is from taxes, and if there's a reduction in that, it affects everything, but you can't cover that. I mean, you can't lay that out in a policy.
Yeah. So again, I mean, and I know I've presented this, it's very short and it's not specific enough relative to it being functional. So that one I would look for a rescindment or amendment. So I'd like to hear from others on the board. You know, these have been out there for a couple of months now. And any opinion?
Yeah, I guess this is Paul. I guess I would suggest that I know we've had them out there for a while, and I don't know that any of us have done any real stewardship around them. But does it make some sense to maybe spread these around, one or two to a couple of folks on the board to try to work up, bring back the revised copies to the board as a whole, and see what we think? I have some ideas, a couple of them I could do some work on. I haven't done that. I'd be happy to look at a couple of them. If someone else would take a couple, we can see if we can come back here to see how the revisions go.
Yeah, sure. I think what I was trying to get to, I mean, are some of these like really worth looking at or aren't they?
Yeah, no, I agree. Some of them are 3 sentences long or something, right? So there's not a lot of meat there, but
And some of them are relative to just responsibilities of the Board of Finance as opposed to a policy. So if we can come to some action points here, that would be great.
I would be happy to revise the appropriation and transfer requests.
So you're, okay. So Ann is going to take appropriation requests and transfers, which I think is one that has merit. Loss of outside revenue.
So I have a question about that, Dan. Sorry.
Yeah. Raise your
Um,
hand. Then I know, then I can see that. Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry. So for loss of outside revenue, I agree. It's very short and very high level. Is any of that covered anywhere else though, in any other policies that we have?
Like Ann was referring, some of what is hinted here is covered by state statute. So again, it was one of my points. I mean, there's something already in place that gives us a guideline.
I think if it's not right in front of the people, then people tend to not know it's there. I mean, I don't think you should have to seek out information. I think it should be on the town website where the people could find it if they had questions. I mean, obviously it should be amended to include everything, you know, the state statutes so that it's current. And if I could mention something, when I was looking at the, like, code of ethics policies, there's a program that's, I think it's called 360 or something like that. Some of the other towns use it, and it said that there was like a fee of, I think it was like $199, if I'm not mistaken. And it refers to all the state statutes, and there's different things where it can create, you know, you have like subscription, and you can go in and create policies. And I mean, it's, obviously you don't need to reinvent the wheel because there's other towns that are already using it.
Yeah.
I mean, that might be helpful.
Yes, the importance of what Carolyn is talking about is that we are a town without a charter. So we kind of reviewed this in the Government Restructure Committee a couple of years ago. So just about all of what happens in the town is driven by state statute. And there's a lot of them. And to her point, a lot of people just aren't familiar with them, or, you know, which are the state statutes that are pertinent to some of the things that we oversee.
Yeah, maybe it would help if, like, on that one especially, we lay out, we're in accordance with state statute and just list the state statutes for that policy. Say there's 5 of them, we list those 5. So when somebody questions it, they don't have to go on Wild Goose Chase to go find.
Yeah.
We're in accordance with state statute, boom, 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 to do the following.
Right.
Maybe that's a little bit easier to do.
Yeah, right.
Because when they write a state statute and it gets either rescinded or canceled, they're going to kick you to the latest and greatest state statute, or they're going to say it's canceled because this goes through this one, or they'll give you a reason. But at least if we can give them a roadmap of you're in accordance with loss of revenue, state statutes of this, I think it would be helpful.
You get a link.
I think that's a good idea, but, you know, then is there actually a policy relative to the Board of Finance of North Stonington?
Maybe the policy would be to follow the state statute, right? You know, so that whatever the state is saying is appropriate, you know, we should be doing that. We shouldn't just pick and choose what statutes we want to follow and what we don't.
Do you want to look at this one, Carl?
Well, there's the municipal guide to Board of Finance that I think
There is.
Greg or someone that always has it on their website that
Right.
is really an in-depth look.
Mhm.
And I don't know who wrote it, I'd have to look it up again, but it really dives into the little details where we
It
can
might be
somehow
the-
have access to that, to have it on our website too. It really explains.
It might be that program because there was a lot of towns that were using it. I know there's-
Yeah, a
I've
lot-
never heard, so.
A lot of towns use that handbook from Sprague. I think it's on almost every single town's website.
Yeah, and Stonington has had, I've seen like signs talking about 360.
I'm wondering if that's the one where our ordinances are. So our ordinance are under the MPI,
Yeah.
MC, the Unicode. I wonder if that's what you're referring to, that it breaks everything down by
It was,
all our ordinances on there.
there was something, I'm trying to remember where.
What I don't want to do is necessarily get into a reiteration of the state statutes, but what is the policy specific to the Board of Finance, Town of North Stonington? And then we can have references to the state statutes.
So if you look at the handbook for Connecticut Boards of Finance, it's a guide to general statutes and principles of financial administration. UConn put it out. And that's really, so that goes into the role of Board of Finance in Connecticut local governments, organization for finance administration, powers and duties of the Board of Finance, local government revenues, preparing budget, municipal accounting, borrowing and debt administration. It really breaks it down for basically non-statute towns.
Is it the 92 version?
Yeah.
Most recent.
The town
Yeah.
of Bristol uses it.
But it's
called
most of it.
Eco360.com.
Okay.
Just make sure I'm looking right there. I'll just
It's actually,
send a picture.
I feel like I have a paper copy of my house.
So Chris, it's called, this is.
Yeah.
Eco360.com.
Yeah, I've seen the signs, and I did check on that. I think it's very good. Okay, so Carolyn has got, and Dan Smith, loss of revenue. And so far has got appropriations and transfers. The next one is town auditor interface. I don't know if we need a policy for that.
I just read it again briefly. I didn't think so. I thought we have to do it. They come through and it's pretty robust. So I'm not sure the policy is adding a whole lot.
Yeah, and then we're mandated to do by state, to do a annual audit.
I think it was added, in between when you were chair and.
Yeah, this
non-chair,
was
and I guess-
2016.
Yeah, from what I recall, at that time, the Board of Finance wasn't necessarily being made aware when the auditor was coming
Oh.
down, and was concerned that, that it was just being handled with the select.
Without the Board of Finance. Okay. Well, again, the auditing is part of the responsibilities of the Board of Finance.
Yeah.
So, I mean, this one, it's just talking about meeting with the auditor and so forth. I mean, to me, I would make a motion to rescind this one. I don't really see it as a policy per se, because it's the audit, the mandate of the audit, that's the policy.
No, I think I would agree with that, Dan. And if that is a motion, I would second that because I think it's part of I think it's Board of Finance 101. And this is part of the role to work with the auditors.
Right, so I make a motion that the Board of Finance rescind the policy number 2016-3, Town Auditor Interface.
Second.
Okay. So I'm going to take Paul's second, Dan, if that's okay. Any further discussion on this one?
is there any history of where that came from and why? that-
Carolyn, do we listen to
I
Carolyn?
think it came, I believe back then, there was a problem where we weren't being notified of when the auditor was coming down. And they, whoever, chairman at the time, felt it was important that we be notified. which
Makes
you
sense.
would expect, but
Well, if it ends up being a problem in the future, we can always revisit this and reinstitute it.
it doesn't seem to be a problem now.
No, and I think the policy is that we contract professional auditing services and that a mandated annual audit takes place. And we have to submit that to the state by the end of the calendar year. So,
Maybe that's what the policy should say.
yeah, but it says that in the mandate of the audit, yeah.
I think, Dan, with my position, I think it's a good go-between for the Board of Finance and the Board of Selectmen. So I think as long as my position exists, there will definitely be communication, whether it's me or someone else.
We didn't have Christine back then when this policy was prepared.
I think that was one of the drivers.
Yeah. Any further discussion? If not, let's move to a vote. All in favor, and I'm going to have to poll, unfortunately. Ann? And Paul Simon?
Aye.
Sarah Nelson?
Yes.
Carolyn?
Yes.
Dan Smith?
Yes.
And myself, yes. So that does pass 6-0-0. So the other one is end of fiscal year budget reconciliation. What it doesn't really talk about as I review this myself, and I'm open for direction here, it doesn't talk about the balanced budget. So I mean, I would see this one being replaced by a policy to have a balanced budget and verbiage relative to that. Any comment on this one? And again, it also says that it's driven by state statute. So I would like to see something more specific relative to a policy of balanced budget.
It's 8 o'clock.
8 o'clock,
CMAs are starting.
all right.
I think, Dan, sorry, Paul and I are waving to each other on Zoom.
I had my head, did one of you want to speak to this?
I think either of us, if it's okay, I'll go. I'm happy to take a pass at mocking this up if someone would be interested in partnering with me.
Paul,
Yeah.
is that a yes, or you want
Yeah,
to
we're
speak?
both waving. I'm on my muted computer, but yes, I'd be happy to help out.
Thank you.
All right, so this is policy 2016-2. And that will be reviewed by Sarah and Paul. Okay. And the last one is the unassigned. So the unassigned that we have in place is, I think, pretty thorough, but we were talking about levels of where that unassigned should be. So as it's written now, it's at 8.5% only as a floor. And that we have the discretion to move it to the upper level without any specifics. So one of the discussions we had was relative to reserves for monthly operations. So the minimum would be a 1 month reserve, target maybe 2 month reserve, or, but I don't think limit us to that. I think we still have to have a little discretion. but at least it gives taxpayers a little more rationale to unassigned levels,
So at 8.5%, what would,
1 month.
it's just 1 month.
So,
But some months aren't there, some months that are more than, yes.
Yeah,
others?
it's the way the encumbrances go.
Dan,
Hmm?
you want to take it on?
Okay. So our unassigned, which doesn't have a number, is going to be reviewed by Ann and Dan Smith. And again, this one's an important one because there's nothing in the state statute that is specific to the unassigned. And yet this is the one piece, I keep calling it the sacred cow, that is most important to what we do and how we're perceived. And yet it's one that could also be contested by taxpayers. You know, why are you putting so much money in unassigned? So I think it has to have a good rationale. And it's beyond just the reserve for expenditures, but also gives us that opportunity to go to the debt market, present ourselves as good, creditworthy people, which allows us to do capital projects.
so in that, would you be looking for, like, if you look at a lot of the other towns, I think I said this before, a lot have a ceiling in there. So if it goes above a certain amount, then those dollars are used for X, Y, Z, and there's a listing of how those dollars are used once it goes above that threshold. Is that something you're
Yeah,
looking
I'll
for?
let that be part of their review. What I would hope to see, though, is that we still have discretion to the ceiling, that we're not. This is it.
Well, that would be what a ceiling would do, though. That's why you have the range, so that way the
Yeah,
residents.
but I would
know.
use it in verbiage rather than say ceiling. I would use target or,
But those towns have charters?
No, the ones that I look at don't. So they'll say
I just
like
wanted
8 to
yeah.
14% or whatever, and then anything over 14%, if it was coming back to the taxpayers at the end of that fiscal year, so the give back, if it created an overage over that percentage, then there's guidelines of what that money would be used for, whether it lower the mill rate for that following year.
A lot of charter towns have that spelled out very clearly, where it's saying if you go like Chelsea Royals, it's 30% is the max.
Right, but just since we're not a charter town, I
We're
just
not
want to make
charter.
sure we're not doing something that we're not trying to do something we can't do without a charter.
I think that one we might.
Because there is no
I think
statute really
that
about.
If we were gonna run any one for a lawyer, I think that would be the one, because it has a direct financial impact as levying tax and also giving revenue back.
But I think Dan's right, if it's not laid out correctly, it could look like we're overtaxing a certain amount to just grow an amount that we can't
right.
substantiate why
Yeah.
we have.
Again, I have to sometimes talk from my own personal optics. I think once you're exceeding 15%, you have to have a justification. You know, so that would put us close to the 2 month reserve would put us a little over that, Caroline.
But really, that's not, I mean, a lot of time to think about it.
No, it's not.
Well,
Yeah.
it's just, you know, if
No,
you're
because the
not
bills
getting
just keep coming
revenues.
in.
And I guess it depends on what those 2 months are. Where in the year those 2 months,
Well, what
if
you
there
have
was something that
natural-
happened, where
natural
does that
disaster.
fall?
What is the normal reimbursement rate for like FEMA? If something catastrophic happened and we had to go on life support now.
I think it's the timeline that's really
It can
the
take
bigger.
years and years to
Takes
get
years
money
and
back.
years, it could be really quick, you know.
Once your project crosses a certain threshold financially, I can't remember what the number is, so I'm not gonna even throw a number out there, but once it gets above to a catastrophic level, they won't reimburse until the whole thing's done.
So the last time we used it, when we had to use it, what, how many years ago?
2000,
Yeah, how long did it take us to recoup that money
2010,
from
yeah,
FEMA?
2010, because I just had come on the board. We had next to nothing in reserve, but we had very little debt. And it was the very little debt that saved us. So we were able to go to the debt market, local bank, and borrow the money to start the construction. And the construction itself took almost 2 years, and then we had to wait almost a year for reimbursement,
You're talking about
Which
a
was a-
3-year window. to
which
try
was
to
at
get that money.
70%.
Now, like something with the COVID reimbursement, how do you like the reimbursement time frame on that? Maybe a quick turnaround, something quick.
Until we hit that upper echelon, it's quick, but once you hit that, you're not gonna get reimbursed until you're done. So that's why I don't wanna throw a number out.
Yeah,
because
it's-
I can't remember what the number is.
I have a couple ideas what we can tie the upper echelon to.
Yeah, and the undersigned, as it's written now, does talk about mitigation of taxes.
Because it's something to be careful of. I mean, I talked to someone today that's lived here 62 years, I think, and they're moving out, and it's because of the tax rate. Now, you hear that a lot, but it is about not only keeping North Stonington affordable when it comes to housing, but our taxes as well. And I think having some kind of limit in there to show people that, look, this money is used for this, we're not going above and beyond and just taxing you to increase our balance.
Well,
Is important.
a stark example would be the current year that we're in. I mean, we took money out of that unassigned, not knowing.
Yeah, we did that.
I mean, I kind of knew what would happen there, but not knowing. We all fronted it and said, look, we're going to mitigate taxes.
It might not always work out.
Well, you're
You
right.
wanna work on that?
That's why I'm concerned about not making too big a hole in
Right.
But anytime
a skinny
you can't
rabbit.
do it, you should.
Right, you wanna work on that with us?
Yeah, I can support that.
All right, so we're adding Brett as well on that. All right. That takes care of that. Thank you. I just want to get some action on these in particular, so. And the two that I sent you, the guideline verbiage was great, and they had a model policy. So, and I looked at a lot of towns, and I like those. I don't want them to be too complicated. I want them to be easily read and understood. All right. So we're on to agenda item number 7. And that's previous minutes. Ann was kind enough to forward minutes of our last meeting. So we'll do a quick review.
It should be the last 2 meetings, July 15th and August 19th.
Okay, let's see what I printed here. Okay, I have August 19th. And the July one I don't have. Do you have the July one?
I've got a copy of the 15th as well.
All right. Since you wrote it, you know it.
Yeah, I sent it out in email.
There's 2 different pieces, or maybe
I think the day after our
It was-
last meeting.
it was.
Yeah, it was.
There's 2 pieces like this, so I wasn't really sure what,
Yeah, it was the 20th you sent it out, and I have them.
Right, so why don't we just take a quick look at the July 15th, and then we'll move on to the other one.
oh, it's a special meeting, sorry. It says there's a special meeting, then there's a regular meeting on the same day. That's what it is.
Oh, yeah, okay. So I didn't print out the special meeting one. apologize.
I have it,
Yeah.
So is there one other one other than the two?
Yeah, it's one where we elected Sarah.
Okay.
Yeah, I didn't print that one out.
I think that's all that was on that.
Yes, that's all it's on.
All right.
if you want this now.
Okay, let's stay on the big one of the 15th, and then we'll come back to the earlier one.
I've got it up on my computer if anybody wants to look.
I think under policy reviews, rather than put all this verbiage in, I think it would be maybe best that, discussion for future review has been assigned or something like that. Because we're putting in stuff here that we might not do relative to the policy. You know what I'm saying? Is everybody okay with that?
Replace it with what?
That we talked about specific policies, but they were being assigned and reviewed. So you mentioned specifically the undesignated fund balance policy and the 2016 one.
Well, but that time they weren't assigned, we were just reviewing them.
Yeah, this was overall discussions about those.
Okay. Can we leave it as
Just being discussed.
just being discussed? Yeah.
And Dan, on bullet 4, sub bullet B,
Uh,
requests 2020-00 with a question mark. Am I missing something there?
That was going to be the transfer number. So on the form, we don't have a number.
Okay.
Remember the transfer requisition form? I think that was the intent there, right, Ann? See, there's the form, but we don't have a number for that specific transfer.
Okay.
And
Do we now, or still not recorded?
we could now, because those were the only transfers for the end of year, right?
Right, but there had been an additional appropriation request earlier. I don't think there were any other transfers. So I feel you'd have to go back and number any earlier ones,
Yeah.
Right,
or we can just start fresh with the new.
right. And that's what you emailed Dan and I after you went back and looked for a number.
Did you use like the fiscal year and then? the
Yeah, so
number?
like the
Yeah.
one for the 19,000, whatever, that was 2021-001.
Okay. So relative to your inquiry, Paul, do we want to just leave that number off for now? I mean,
I guess so. I really didn't understand what the question mark was, but now I know exactly what you've answered the question.
All right, so leave it be.
I do find it.
why don't we take it off? And Christine, you could probably number them, right? You want to go back and do a review? And just bring
Like
them
number the old ones?
for 1920?
I can.
All right, so send me a number when you get it.
All right, I would move that we approve the minutes of Board of Finance meeting dated July 15th, 2020, as amended. We have a second by Dan Smith. Any further discussion?
I have a procedural question.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was
Sure.
I was elected but not sworn in at that point. Should I abstain or just not vote?
Yeah, you can abstain. Yeah. All right, all in favor indicate by saying aye. We'll do it rather than polling.
Aye.
Hey,
I have to abstain.
you abstain as well? Right. So the vote is 4-0-2. The abstentions are Sarah Nelson and Carol. Okay, so the next one would be the special meeting minutes, which was preceding this meeting. Same date, 7/15/20. And there, it was rather short, but we filled the alternate vacancy by electing Sarah Nelson. So I would move that we approve those minutes for the special meeting, July 15th, which occurred at 6:30 PM as presented. Dan and Dan on both those. Any other discussion? Okay, the vote would be the same, right? Because you weren't there and Sarah wasn't elected. So it's 4-0-2, if that's all right with everybody?
It is, yeah.
You know, technically, you don't have to vote on minutes. Unless there's an amendment.
All right, so the last one is August 19th.
And I remember needs of stuff like meat.
All right.
You're just doing it on purpose to keep people on their toes, make sure they read. I like it.
Okay, again, Board of Finance policies review. I think we probably would do the same there and discussion. All right, I would make a motion that we approve the Board of Finance meeting minutes dated August 19th as amended.
Second.
Any further discussion? Hearing none, a vote, all in favor?
I wasn't there, Dan, so I'll abstain.
Yep. Gotcha. All right. Thank you. Those are done. All right. Future strategies, agenda item number 8. We're really now in the phase of our auditing services, doing our fiscal year 2019-20. As they do that and have field work here, it probably isn't going to happen at all. I usually do meet with them, but I will make a call to Sandy Wellwood, and then they would be back to do a draft presentation to us, which if we were to accept what they've presented, it would be final and then prepared for distribution to include not only the town, but the state. Anything you want to add there, Kristen? The other item is that, as you know, every year we do an annual report. It's just kind of what happened in the town of North Stonington. All the boards and commissions make their submission. Carolyn Howell was point of contact last year. I don't know if you want to be the point of contact this year.
I mean, I already sent out the ask for on behalf of the board of finance. Yeah, I mean, we just sent it out this week, last week, and we have a deadline of November 16th. So Carolyn, if you'll help me as we get closer, if I haven't heard from the usual suspect.
I'll get done.
You are on that list.
I did talk to Peter Nero, and he was going to try his hardest to meet that deadline, but it might be a little bit over.
The one thing that I did ask, so if anybody's mentioning anything to you, I did ask that everyone submit in a regular Word document, no formatting, so it's easier for me to put things together, because when you're trying to merge all these different things together, it's one. And then we'll make it look nice afterwards. We've also requested pictures from any boards and commissions and departments that have pictures. These pictures make things more interesting. So those are the 2 changes.
Also, the annual report is a mandate from the state, which a lot of people don't. It's something we've got to do. The only other hanging issue that I didn't put on there because it was an afterthought was we talked about putting a liaison on board of Ed. I know I talked to Carolyn about that, whether or not you want to do it, but unfortunately they're meeting on Wednesdays as we are.
I said I did mine.
So it's time
Work
consuming.
it out, and I know my hand is
Okay. All right, so we can name you and Mike kind of to tag team that. All right, great, thank you.
October, you guys do not have conflicting meetings, but for November and December you do. So
if I know enough in advance, I can, you know.
And they usually start at 6 if I got it right.
They did a weird thing. They're 6:30 for some times and 6 for other times, because I forget why they, I was at the meeting when they changed their meeting times, and I don't remember what the reasoning was.
I think they moved it to 6.
I know right now they're 6:30, but I feel like at another time they're 6 o'clock, like another time of the year. And it had something to do with these.
Yeah, it was
Well,
something,
that's
but then they had to file their meetings.
Yeah.
So if you look, so they're 6:30, the only one that they had was with us.
The November, December will be the same, because I.
Yeah, so
went to
November,
the space for it, so that's why.
o'clock, is their November meeting.
Yeah, I know
Or at
historically it'd been at 6, but yeah.
Yeah, so if you look at the calendar, they had one at
The winter,
6.
the winter ones are at 6. The November, December, January, February, March are at 6, and then April through October are 6:30. I think that's honestly what it is. Because I was at the meeting when they talked about it, and I think that was the reason.
So how did that change? Is that,
That's what they filed.
I'm just wondering, because it was always opposite weeks
It
based
might have just
on
been
your
based on what the calendar was.
ordinance or your,
Yeah, I know that those 2 months there are the same. Because I had to say, hey, what are we gonna do about this room? Because we're both be here at the same time. I don't have an answer.
Well, the sports, like, sports.
can we just Zoom those meetings or something?
Maybe.
But then during budget time, you guys meet almost every week, so.
All right, just to almost bring us to the conclusion here, I just want to bring up one other thing, this was a situation relative to the school and the playground, which was not part of the school modernization project. And yet a lot had to be done there. So money was raised and they've done a great job there. but
8:30.
Still have to resurface areas. So I was approached on a personal level for an appropriation vis-a-vis the Board of Finance. So I just said, and again, this could come in the verbiage for appropriations and transfers. So I'd like them to go through Board of Selectmen first, then to come to us, and if there should be a request for an appropriation, just so that everybody's in the loop. And if somebody is approaching you as a Board of Finance member, just say their appropriation has to be forwarded to the Board of Selectmen and they can bring it forward. For ground cover in playscape area. They thought they could do with what they had, but they found a lot of mold and insects in what's there, so they're stripping it and putting new ground cover.
Okay. About, maybe you could add this to future strategies, like the elderly and people on fixed income, like struggling, especially now, like is there something that we could put in place to help them, you know, increases?
We can look
And I don't know
into,
what's already in place.
there's some towns that put it's not a big one, but put a discount for those showing a need assessment and over the age of 65. So there's no reason to look at that, in my opinion. I'll see what other towns are doing.
I think I'm sorry, Caroline, you were, I don't know if you're near a microphone, but you're cutting out. I couldn't quite hear you, but I think I caught the gist of it. Just curious, and Dan, I'm happy to help research that as well. I think it's interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Sarah. So I'm sure there's some criteria relative to needs assessment, and I certainly know age is one of them. But I think it would be a nice thing to do, quite frankly. We can do it.
And, I mean, there might be people that are under the age of 65 who could show a need.
Yeah, I just know I have seen it in other towns, and they
Yeah.
usually mention
Right.
an age. Doesn't have to be 65, it could be 60 or
Right.
55, I don't know.
There's some program already, I just checked our website, there's some program in existence right now for elderly and disabled. So I'll get some information from Daryl and Cecile as to what we're currently doing. Because I had to look on the website, so know that not that many people probably know about whatever we're doing, so I can get that information for the next meeting as well.
Great. I have nothing else under future strategies. If anything wants to be introduced, it can be. Okay. Do we have anybody on for public comments? Any public comments? Anyone who wants to ask a question or have a comment?
You're watching the same things right now.
Right?
No, Brian,
You disappoint me.
No, Brian. No, Brian, no joke, gross. Just happy.
All right. Hearing none, I would entertain a motion for adjournment.
Make a motion to adjourn.
Paul and Dan. And I'm going to make it unanimous.
Yeah.
What time? What time?
The time would be 8:35.
Night.
What-
Good night, team.
Everybody okay? All good? Work on your assignments and we'll bring it up again at the next meeting. And these are things I'd like to get concluded because before we know it, we'll be back in budget.
And Nita will be on us.
Can I end everything?
Yeah. Thank you, everybody.
Good night.
Night.